Hello, I am Candace, a licensed professional counselor, and you are watching Inside of New England's Therapeutic Talk. Please like, subscribe, and comment below. Hello, everybody. I have a very special guest today. He's Dr. Umar Johnson. Umar is just so many things. He's an advocate, a leader. He's a king, and an author, and he's a doctor of clinical psychology. He is founding a new school. He wrote the book Black Parent Advocate, and I'm just so excited because he's going to be coming to Middletown, Connecticut, which is not far from my house, on the 27th at the Free Center, in Middletown, and then the day after that he'll be going to Providence, Rhode Island, and then later on he'll be going to Boston. So it's like the little New England tour. I'm really looking forward to it, and I hope everybody enjoys the conversation that I had with Umar.
Excited to be here with you today, and I'm so honored, and First, I want to thank you for everything that you do, that you've done for the community, and the work that you do. It's extremely important, and thank you so much.
Thank you. It's an honor to be with you.
Talk about things that sometimes people don't want to hear, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I don't know, for people who may not know you, if
I could start with a introduction. Certainly. My name is Dr. Umar Ifatunde. I am a certified school psychologist, certified school principal. I'm also a doctor of clinical psychology, author of the books Psychoacademic Holocaust, The Special Education, and ADHD Wars Against Black Boys, as well as my new book, Black Parent Advocate, The Art of War for Dealing with America's Public and Charter Schools. And currently, I am working to build a school, the Frederick Douglass and Marcus Garvey Academy, which will be the first of its kind in America for Black boys, which will focus on nation building, international relations, and economic empowerment for African people globally. So we're working on that now in Wilmington, Delaware.
Yay, that's so amazing. We're so excited about the school. When do you think it will actually be up and running?
That's a great question. We're hoping that the renovations, we have two schools that are right across the street from each other. So we have a campus, it's 4 buildings in total. We're working on the Marcus Garvey Elementary School first, and I'm hoping that we can have those renovations done by the end of the summer, so we can have a grand opening community celebration festival and conference. And once we're done the Garvey School, we will then shift our focus to the Frederick Douglass High School, which is a much larger school, but it's right across the street.
Yay. And this is going to be for boys and girls?
It's going to initially be for boys only. And the reason it's going to be for boys only is because when you look at the school to prison pipeline, which I refer to as the psychoacademic Holocaust, it is largely a Black male phenomenon. Yes, Black girls are beginning to catch up. Black girls are the fastest growing population to be diagnosed as ADHD, to be prescribed medication, to be placed in special education. The girls are catching up, and they're catching up fast. But as a percentage per capita, without question, Black boys are far ahead of Black girls when it comes to them being trapped, marginalized, criminalized, juvenile, adjudicated, medicated, and special educated. The boys still far outweigh the girls in every index of school pathology. So special ed is still overwhelmingly boy. ADHD is still overwhelmingly boy. Psychiatric med is still overwhelmingly boy. And so that's why we're going to start with the boys first.
Okay. That was actually my mom's question for you.
Okay.
She was like, why not the girls too? Okay. And you don't want to do anything co-ed.
I could foresee a reality of the girls beginning probably 3 to 5 years into the school's opening. So we first want to master the boys' culture and process and climate, and then we'll extend it to the girls.
And I agree with you because I feel like the male presence is missing right now in our communities. So probably more, like essential to have the males first. They're just not there, right?
Yes.
So I wanted to ask you about school. So we both work with children.
Okay.
I work with kids a lot and families, and I know you. So what's the training that you're doing with parents right now?
The Black Parent Know Your School Rights Boot Camp is a 8 in the morning until 8 p.m. in the evening, 12-hour intensive training seminar, which includes paperwork, a lot of paperwork. They get about a book's worth of paperwork. And every hour we tackle a different subject. So we go from special ed process to federal laws that relate to the proper education of our children in the schools. We talk about the learning disabilities. We talk about the FERPA, Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. We go into depth about special ed law itself, which is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Improvement Act of 2004. We deal with discipline, behavior modification, letter writing, understanding the paperwork that the school gives you. We deal with ADHD, the psychiatric medications, pre-referral intervention, understanding the psychological evaluation report. I am not aware of another training designed for Black parents that gives them what I give them in those 12 hours. And so coming up in New England, we have a boot camp for Massachusetts on Saturday, April the 10th. And although that is the Massachusetts boot camp, any Black parent can attend. So if a parent from Connecticut wants to make the drive to Boston, they can. If a parent from Rhode Island wants to make the ride to Boston, they can. And that's Saturday, April 10th from 8 to 8. They can register for that on my website at drumarjohnson.com. But prior to that, and thanks to you, I'll be releasing the new book, Black Parent Advocate, in Middletown, Connecticut on Saturday, March the 27th, in about 2 weeks, almost 3 weeks from now, at the free space of 52 North Main Street. So we want everybody in Connecticut who does not have the new book to come on out and get it. They can come from 2 p.m. to 8 p.m. Saturday, March the 27th at the free space in Middletown, Connecticut. Dr. Umar will be there, and it will also serve as a special ed drop-in clinic. Any questions about your child, whether you purchased the book or not, is irrelevant. You can come by and ask me those questions. You can show me your child's paperwork, and I'll give you some expert consultation for free right there on the site. So we have a little New England tour because you have Middletown book release on Saturday the 27th. The very next day, you have Providence, Rhode Island book release on Sunday the 28th. And then you have the Black Parent Boot Camp in Boston on April the 10th. So New England gets a little bit of attention this month, which is well overdue.
Yeah, we need the help. Yeah, so they can actually so if parents have some questions, they can actually bring. And I know I've been talking to a few people since you said that you're coming, and people are really getting excited about you coming. So that's really great.
Glad to hear.
So
and I'm sure at some point I'll be doing the boot camp in Connecticut as well. In fact, once I set eyes on the free space, who knows? They may have enough space there for the boot camp at a later date.
Yeah, it's a pretty good space. Yeah, that's great. And then, so with your work, I know, so are you encouraging parents to actually seek help if they're needing it? Or I think a big part of the problem, so what you're saying, like about the advocacy, like helping them to look at the paperwork. Like we don't have enough advocates available uh, to help parents go to meetings, know the rights, know what to ask for, what services to ask for. I don't know. Do you think there's anything that we could do about that?
What I try to do with both the book Black Parent Advocate as well as the Know Your School Rights boot camp is I try to empower the parent to be their own advocate.
Right.
Because when you walk into a school with an advocate, schools do straighten up, they talk right, but they also know that you really don't know the law and the policy yourself. Because if you did, you wouldn't have an advocate.
Okay.
And so the school knows that that advocate isn't going to be there forever.
Right.
You know, no advocate is with a parent forever.
No.
So at some point, you have to stop depending on the advocate and learn how to advocate for yourself. So I'm very much about parent empowerment, very much about parent empowerment. You can't just keep waiting on somebody else to do the talking for you. And you have to learn it yourself. But for a lot of our parents, they have to overcome the intimidation that a lot of them feel when they walk into these schools.
Right.
You know, and you know, that's a maturity thing. It's an emotional thing. It's a practice thing. It does take time, but a lot of our parents are intimidated. They're intimidated by the education of the individuals inside the school. So it's a class issue, but they're also intimidated by the race. Right. So you're looking at race multiplied by class when you have a parent who may be working class going into a school that is dominated by mostly white women who are middle and upper class and who are white. So they have to deal with the racism and the classism, and sometimes the male principle, so sexism as well. So all three of those variables can really make a Black mother uncomfortable. And I say Black mother, not because the fathers are not there, but 67% of our children are raised by the mother alone. And so when you talk about empowering the Black parent, you're definitely talking about empowering fathers and, you know, other non-custodial guardians, but mostly you're talking about empowering the single Black mother. And so I want them to go in there and take on the fight themselves. And there's another reason for that as well. Advocates don't know everything. And although some of them are very good at what they do, some of them are very poor at what they do. And sometimes the advocate will take on a case from a personal, emotional perspective that neglects the parent's own agenda. And not only that, when a parent gets an educational attorney, sometimes the educational attorney may not fight for what the parent is entitled to. I've seen cases where the attorney, I felt, short-sighted the parent and really didn't fight for what I felt that child deserved. So whenever you get that advocate, whenever you get that lawyer, you're putting your child's educational destiny into the hands of another people, into another person.
Right.
And you have to ask yourself, is that the right thing to do? I'm of the opinion, if the parent can fight, if they know how to fight, and if they're comfortable enough to fight, they should carry the fight themselves.
Yeah, because they're always going to be there, which is true.
Yes. And when you go to things like due process, when you take the school to the state level and register your complaint, once you sign off on that due process resolution, there's no going back for that particular issue. So, you know, if that attorney sold you short and you signed off, and our parents have a bad habit of signing stuff that they don't read. We have a very bad habit of signing stuff we don't read. Once you sign off on that resolution, there's no going back. So if your child didn't get what they were entitled to, and that lawyer, you know, told you this was the best you could get and you signed it, there's no going back, not for that particular issue. It's over with. So, you know, you're talking about some permanent decisions that have lasting consequences for our children.
Yeah. I've had like so many parents, they're so thankful when they have me as a therapist, because I go to the meetings with them. And sometimes
Okay.
they're the only, like, they're just like, oh my gosh, I'm here with all of these white people, and it's just nice to have somebody else there, even though, there's not a whole lot I can do all the time, but I can at least, help them prepare themselves and
Yeah. And because the
be there
schools
when they need to
know,
hear it. Right.
absolutely.
Yeah, so I hear
And,
what's happening here.
and because the schools know that our parents don't know educational law or policy, they take advantage of them in ways they would never take advantage of a white parent. I was on the phone the day before yesterday with a parent of a special ed child, and two of the school team members called her up and told her her son could not come back to the school.
Oh.
Now, first of all, the only legal authority that can refuse a child entry into school is the school board. The local school board is the only entity that has the legal power to expel. Because when they told her her son could not come back permanently, that was an expulsion. That was a permanent removal from school. Only the local school board can do that. The principal can't do that. On top of that, this was a special ed child.
Yeah, yeah.
So not only was the school board needed, the IEP team needed to have conducted a manifestation determination to determine that the reasons for which this child was being permanently expelled from school did not relate to his disability or their failure to properly design or implement the IEP. So two federal rights were violated when they called that parent and told her her child could not come back to school. And these were two major federal rights. His constitutional right to due process was totally negated by the school. They would have never done that with a white parent.
No.
But because she's Black and she's a single mother, they pretty much assume we can do what we want because she does not know her rights. And that's why what I do is so important, because there's very few Black educators, school psychologists who are training, teaching, and helping parents the way that I do it. And in many cases for free.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so important. Can you maybe talk about post-traumatic slavery disorder?
Yes. For me, post-traumatic slavery disorder is the residuals of the trauma that African people encountered during their passage from America through the Caribbean to the United States. And those traumas that our ancestors experienced, they are still with us. They are still in us. And we have to resolve them. Now, when you look at post-traumatic stress disorder out of the DSM, the current manual for mental illness from the American Psychiatric Association, it talks about how traumas can be passed on intergenerationally. Traumas can be vicariously transferred. That means you were not in the car accident, for example, but you saw the car accident. And even though you were not in the car accident, by you re-experiencing it or being told about it in the second or third person, the trauma can be transferred to you. In addition to that, when you look at all the symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder as laid out in the DSM, they all apply to American Africans today. So post-traumatic slavery disease, in many respects, is the post-traumatic stress disorder of American Africans as a result of the Ma'afa. The recurrent memories, the intense emotion, the inability to function, to understand, to not control the pain and the emotion. All of the criteria for post-traumatic stress are present in American Africans as a result of slavery. And the reason that they will not consider post-traumatic slavery disease a true and living mental illness, which it is because it would only help the American African case for reparations. If you make post-traumatic slavery disorder, or as I say, disease, a mental illness, you have just validated it as a true mental disorder that has resulted from slavery that is still with Black people. And as you know, when you quantify damages financially as a result of psychological abuse,
Right.
sometimes the psychological damages can end up costing you more than any monetary or physical restitution. In other words, America owes African people more for the psychological trauma of slavery than for the unpaid labor of our ancestors.
Yeah, that's deep. And I think it probably would be pretty much avoided then, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
but we also owe ourselves, I would say. We also owe ourselves, because although there's a such thing as external reparations, there's something known as internal reparations. Reparations doesn't mean money. Reparations means repair. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of internal repairing that we need to do on ourselves. White people can't heal Black people.
Right.
We have to heal ourselves. And we have to heal ourselves from all of the European conditioning and acculturation that we have absorbed these past 400 years. Many of us have become Europeans ourselves. There's nothing the white man can do to undo that. We have to undo that ourselves, and not to make light of the financial that is owed to us or the physical that is owed to us. I want to emphasize that most of the repairing that has to be done to African people does not have a dollar value. Black men and Black women needing to retrust one another. There's no dollar value that can fix that. Okay, our need to stop engaging in petty differences that were ingrained in our psyche through slavery. No dollar amount can fix that. Okay, the broken Black family, no dollar amount can fix that. The love for all things white, the love for conspicuous consumption of European-made goods, no dollar amount can fix that. So I would argue that at least 70% of the damage done to African people was psychological. And it is that can only be repaired by Africans, not Europeans.
How can we do that with each other?
We have to organize. Mm-hmm. The reason why it's so difficult to organize Black people, in addition to the self-hatred that was encultured in us, ingrained in us, is the fact that the African-American community is not self-sustaining in any way outside of religion. And what I mean by that is there is no service that we offer to each other that our people can get that doesn't include somebody of another race. We don't have our own employment system. We don't have our own justice system, community-based justice system. We don't have a community-based patrol system. We don't have a community-based education system. We don't have our own banks, few of those, very few schools, very few supermarkets, almost no hospitals. So there's no critical service that Black people need that they can get from Black people. No. How do you convince people to be loyal to an entity, the Black community, that doesn't make deposits into their lives? You go to the Jewish community, Latino community, Arab community, Chinese community, Anglo-Saxon community. There are institutions and systems in place. They might not have them all, but they have some. For example, you look at the Latino community. They have their issues, but they have their own supermarkets. The Latino community has its own supermarkets here in Philadelphia. So that's one thing they can get from themselves. They can they can sell their own food to each other.
Right.
And they can employ their own people in those supermarkets. At least they have that. Okay. Other communities have their own medical centers. They have their own banks. Chinatown in Philadelphia and across the country is so well organized and self-sufficient. The Black community have created a whole culture out of begging white people for stuff that we should be doing ourselves. And that is a culture that needs to die, and it needs to die fast because, as the Honorable Marcus Garvey said, a race that depends upon another for its existence sooner or later dies, end quote.
And we have like a lot of issues with like loving ourselves and then supporting each other just in general. I think,
We do. And to be honest with you, the way forward is not to try to save everybody, because you can't. Some of our people are so far gone with their love affair with European culture that you'll never be able to save them. The way forward is to find people who are willing to push forward independently, who believe that African people in America and across the world can save themselves. That is the way forward, to find those of like mind and build with those of like mind. Now, speaking for myself, that becomes a challenge too. And the reason it becomes a challenge to build with those of like mind is I attract people around me who are not necessarily interested in the liberation struggle. They're more caught up in the Dr. Umar idea, you see. And so when I look back over the past 20 years of work and past 11 years in particular, a lot of the brothers and the sisters that have found their way into my immediate outer circle, they were not really about the work. They were about the attention and the status that accrued to them by being associated with Dr. Umar. So for someone like me, it's even tougher, because not only do you have to find the right people, you have to weed out all of the actors who come your way too. So it's a very tough road. It's a very tough road. I always say, if I could do it all over, two things. One, if I knew that in 2010, my role within the global African liberation struggle would be heightened, would go to a new level, I would have married younger. I can see where not having that steady mate who is also committed to the people, I can see where that has short-sighted my work. And the other thing is I would have tried to have an inner circle, a trusted team of men and women who could help me carry out the work, because both of those things, and especially the second thing, the trusted team, finding and developing that, has been a major challenge, because the celebrity of Dr. Umar sometimes undermines Dr. Umar, the political organizer.
Yeah, it's tough. So what, and then you brought up the whole marriage thing. So what do you recommend for women right now, like such as myself, who are, have their own job, their own home, and are not married yet? Like, what do you recommend for us?
It's tough on our women because of the war against Black men. There's not enough able-bodied men to go around. I believe, according to the most recent census data, if you married every able-bodied Black man to a Black woman in America, there would still be approximately 2 million Black women without a husband. 2 million. That's a lot of people. Okay. And that doesn't include the men who are incarcerated. So once you account for incarceration, that 2 million easily creeps up to about 3 million Black women who will not have a mate. Number one, I think that although there's a lot more Black women than men, I think Black women need to understand that there's a lot of Black women who a lot of men would not find desirable, which means it reduces the ratio. So for example, in Philadelphia, the ratio was like 1 Black man to, I think, 8 Black women. So sister might say, well, 1 to 8, what chance do I serve? Well, some of those sisters lead an alternative lifestyle. So you got to keep in mind, okay, they're trans or they're lesbian. So you knock that number down to probably 1 to 5. And then some of those women who are not married may be in a committed civil union with a man. So you knock that down. Now you're looking at maybe 1 to 4. And then you have some sisters with serious mental illness, and you knock that down and you're looking at 1 to 2. My point is, when you account for all the different variables that would make a woman not available to a man, the ratio is not as bad as it looks. Okay. But I also noticed that for Black women, they tend to entertain someone in the meantime until they find what they're really looking for. And I think that's a recipe for disaster, because from a spiritual standpoint, even if you know the man you're with is not the one, if you're still emotionally bonded to him, the universe may be reluctant to send you the man you need, because you may mistreat him and reject him because you're still bonded to the man you don't need. So I think we have to understand that sometimes to get what you want, you have to be totally free to receive it. And a lot of times we're not totally free. In addition to that, I think a lot of American African women have a certain image of the man that they want that may need to undergo some psychosurgery. So they might want a super alpha male, super attractive, well-educated, good money. They want an alpha. And there's nothing wrong with wanting an alpha. The problem is alphas are not known for monogamy. You understand? So the very type of man that a lot of sisters want does not lend himself easily to the 1 man, 1 woman rule. So I think sisters should probably consider dating more of a beta type male who still has the income, still has the education, extremely responsible, will be committed in a monogamous union, but he may not have all the physical attributes. It's the swag factor that gets a lot of sisters in trouble. It's the swag factor. You guys will take the swag factor and put that at the top of the list. And a brother over here who has no swag, but would have been a perfect mate, is overlooked for a brother over here who didn't really have everything you desired, but he had the swag. And unfortunately, sisters are so attracted to the swag that a lot of them often end up finishing last. Y'all have to put the swag factor in its place and stop letting it overwhelm your entire list of prerequisites.
Okay. So do you want to talk about your book?
Black Parent Advocate, The Art of War for Dealing with America's Public and Charter Schools. I was going to add the word racist to it at first in the subtitle. I was going to say The Art of War for Dealing with America's Racist Public and Charter Schools. But I kept it off because I said, Dr. Umar, you already have a reputation. Keep it a little calm. So I kept racist out. But the book is divided into 2 chapters. There's 2 parts. The first part is what I call correspondence. This is how you respond to the school effectively. Most of my advocacy with Black parents is teaching them how to respond to the school effectively. The school sends you a letter. We want to evaluate your son. How do you respond to that if you don't agree? Mm-hmm. You saw the parent I spoke about a few minutes earlier. They called her up and said, your son can't come back to school. Illegal expulsion and refusal of due process. 2 federal rights were violated. Most of my consult with that parent centered on helping her draft the letter. How do I respond to what they just did to my child? So most of your work as a parent advocate in the schools is teaching them how to respond articulately, effectively, and non-emotionally. So the first half of the book talks about some of the major problems that parents are going to run into: ADHD, drugs, behavior, learning disability, poor special ed service. How do I respond? So I give them some background information about each problem. I tell them, this is the problem with ADHD. This is the problem with autism. This is the problem with speech and language. This is the problem with the psychological evaluation. This is the problem with the private school. This is the problem when your child doesn't pledge the flag, pledge allegiance. And then I give them the letter that they can send to the school to address that problem. And to be honest with you, that book, Black Parent Advocate, was motivated in part due to the fact that after the first book, parents had the information, but they still didn't know how to formulate the letter as a result of the information. So the first book, Psychoacademic Holocaust, drove forth the necessity for the second book. So the first part is your correspondence, how to respond to the school when they target your child. The second part of the book is forms review. So in the second part of the book, Candace, what I do is I teach them how to understand some of the most popular and prevalent documents that they will get from the school, how to understand the psychological evaluation report, how to understand the individual education plan, how to understand the behavior intervention plan, how to understand the pre-referral intervention plan. There's also a chapter on how to homeschool your children.
Okay. Yeah.
There's a chapter on how to change behavior without medication. There's a chapter on how to conduct yourself at the school meeting. Black parents need to know how to conduct themselves when they go into the school. And so I have a whole chapter on that. The book took me 3 years to write, and I'm very proud of it because for the first time, parents can pick up a book and find out how to deal with the problem that they're having. In fact, the parent that I consulted with that we discussed a minute ago, had she had the book, and she doesn't because I haven't had a book signing in her city yet, but had she had the book, she may not have needed to call me. That's how well prepared that book is towards helping Black parents. And I also want to say to your listeners who would like to support us with the Frederick Douglass Marcus Garvey Academy, because here's the thing, Candace, the solution is not to keep writing books, teaching parents how to fight the system. That's a Band-Aid. A Band-Aid does what? It covers the wound until you can find a solution for the bleeding. The Band-Aid doesn't stop the bleeding, it covers it up. So the solution is for us to build our own schools for our own children. And for your listeners and viewers who want to help us do that, we want them to please donate to the Frederick Douglass and Marcus Garvey Academy. You can go to drumarjohnson.com and you can become a loyal donor. $50 a month is bronze, $100 a month is silver, $250 is gold, $500 is platinum, $1,000 a month is diamond. Or you can make random donations whenever you are able through the school's Cash App, which is $FDMG School on the Cash App. Again, that's $FDMG School For those of you on the Cash App, and for those of you who are on PayPal, you can use paypal.me/FDMG Academy, paypal.me/FDMG Academy. They can also mail their donations to P.O. Box 9634, Wilmington, Delaware. That's FDMG Academy, P.O. Box 9634, Wilmington, Delaware, 19809. And that information is on the website too. Okay. And if they got to reach out to me directly, my email is drumarjohnson@yahoo.com. They can also reach me at 8444 Dr. Umar. That's 8444 DRUMAR.
So the homeschooling, I was wondering, like, do you have any recommendations for parents?
Yes,
right now?
A couple tips on homeschooling. And of course, on Saturday, March the 27th, they're going to come get the book at the free space and read the entire chapter on homeschooling. But a few tips. When you decide to homeschool, number one, how long are you going to be homeschooling? And what I mean here, Candace, is will you be homeschooling just until the end of the current academic year? So let's say your kid is a third grader. Are you going to be homeschooling until the end of school, May or June? Or are you going to be homeschooling until the end of fifth grade? Are you going to be homeschooling until the end of seventh grade? You need to know your goal. Too many parents start homeschooling without a goal. How long are you doing this? Are you taking them to high school graduation? Or is this just a temporary thing? And the reason you need to know that, Candace, is if that child will be returning to public, charter, private, or independent or parochial school at some point, if that child is going back to school, you need to make sure you keep up with state grade level standard. So when your child re-enrolls in public, charter, private, independent, parochial school, they will be on grade level.
Right.
Candace, I have seen horror stories of Black children who parents took them out to homeschool, did not do a good job. In many cases, did not homeschool at all, stuck them back into the school. And now the child is 2-3 grade levels behind and looking like he's mentally ill. You follow me?
Yeah.
I once evaluated a child at an African-centered school, charter school in Philadelphia, who cried while I was testing him. He started crying. And when I asked him why, he said, it's because my mother took me out of school and really didn't teach me much. And now I don't know how to do anything.
Aww.
I'm paraphrasing his words, but that's what he pretty much said. And
Right.
It hurt me.
Yeah.
It hurt my heart. That was probably the worst homeschool horror story I ever had. And his mother, who was a good person, was not honest with herself, Candace.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is, do you have the time to homeschool your child?
Right.
Do you have the energy to homeschool your child? Do you have the patience to homeschool your child? And are you organized? Are you a organized enough parent to homeschool your child? If you are not organized, you have no business homeschooling.
Right.
Because homeschooling requires a whole lot of organization. And I've seen parents I know in the Black conscious movement. They got their own business. They're working with an organization. But yet, they're homeschooling their child. My question is how? How do you don't have time as it is to run your business and run your organization. You don't have time as it is. And so now you're going to homeschool your child. The child always suffers, Candace. So you got to make sure you're being honest with yourself. Another question. Are you the person who should be homeschooling your child? Candace, all of us expect more from our children than anyone else does.
Mm-hmm.
As a result of that, we're going to be tyrannical when teaching our children. We're going to expect perfection when teaching our children. We're going to be hard, and we're going to run the line of being verbally or emotionally abusive to our children. I have seen children, Candace, who were homeschooled, who absolutely did not need to be homeschooled by their parents. So you have to recognize that in yourself.
Yeah.
You have to recognize that in yourself and find somebody else to homeschool your child. Because if your child is being verbally abused by you, the homeschooling parent, they're going to sooner or later psychologically drop out. They're going to drop out, and they're going to stop trying because they associate learning with pain, because you do not know how to separate being a parent from being a teacher.
Right.
And the last point that I'll give you, and there's many more in the book, but the last point I'll give you, you got to have a homeschooling coach, Candace. See, if you're a teacher in a school, you have a principal. If you're a teacher in a school, you have a principal. So you have a natural built-in person who supervises your work. Your work is going to get supervised. But guess what? If you're a homeschooling parent, you don't have no principal. There's nobody supervising you.
Right.
And you're going to think that what you're doing is 100% effective and 100% accurate. So my other piece of advice to homeschooling parents, find you another homeschooling parent or a professional educator or a principal, school psychologist. Find somebody who can come in, test your child, and give you feedback on how well of a job you're doing. You need feedback. And too many homeschooling parents are homeschooling in isolation without any feedback. You got to have a coach.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's tricky. I do have a parent that I work with that is kind of like, she's questioning a little bit of that. She's homeschooling and questioning if she's doing things right. Like, I spend a lot of time with her, like working on behavioral modification, like her behaviors towards the kids.
And here's the thing.
She wants them to do all the work, you know, and then she's like, am I being too hard?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
And I recommend that the parents work together and start a homeschool network, Candace.
Yeah.
In other words, if you got five single mothers homeschooling their kids in Middletown, Connecticut, why not start a homeschool network? Those 5 mothers should be working together,
right?
Which does what? It eases the burden on everybody,
Right.
and lightens the load. So one parent does math, one parent does science, one parent does language, one parent does civics, one parent does your physical education, and you cover every base.
Yeah.
So now you're teaching one day a week as opposed to all 5 days out of the week, whenever possible. And that is something you might want to recommend to the parent you're discussing right now. You should talk to her to see if there's other parents in the neighborhood who she could team up with and start a homeschool network.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I don't think I've heard of anybody doing that. Like, they get together and go to parks and stuff, but I haven't heard about them like splitting up the day.
Right, splitting up the instruction.
Right.
They need to get together, split up the instruction, divide the responsibility. And guess what? Their children would love it too, because they need a break from their mother. They need a break from their father. Yeah. And that's serious though, Candace, because there's something known as homeschool burnout. Homeschool burnout is not just the parent burning out. It's the child burning out from constantly seeing their mother all day. Remember, she's the mother. So when school is over, they're going to see her all day. And she's the teacher. So they see her all day. See, when you go to a school building, there's a natural break. You get a time off. The mom get a break from the kid every day. The kid gets a break from the mother every day. But if the mother is the homeschooler, there's no break. When do I get away from my mother? Children need a break. And so they can suffer from homeschool burnout where they don't get enough opportunities to separate from their caregiver.
So the self-esteem, like with kids, once they are labeled with something, the
biggest side effect of classifying a child with a learning disability is the damage it does to their self-esteem. That's the biggest problem. If somebody said, Dr. Umar, what is the biggest problem you have with special ed? It is the impact that being in special education will have on that child's self-esteem, self-concept, and self-image. And the damage that the labels do to our children, Candace, is so powerful that they may never rebound from it. I had a student who was misclassified as intellectually disabled, misclassified. I reevaluated him, found out he was never intellectually disabled. Couldn't wait to share the news with him. But guess what? The damage had already been done, Candace. He had already been convinced that he was retarded. And I don't know what happened to him by now, because this was about 10 years ago. But he needed therapy. He had to go to therapy to try to pull him out of this self-destructive belief that he could not do anything or become anything because he was told in middle school that he was mentally retarded. That is how powerful these labels are. And that's why I encourage parents. Do not share the label with your child.
Yeah.
If you believe he's ADHD, let you believe that. If you believe he's conduct disorder, let you believe that. If you believe he's emotionally disturbed and reading disabled and math disabled, you go ahead and believe that. But you do not put that belief in your child's head. And if you notice, Candace, I said belief. I didn't say fact.
Right.
The reason I said belief is because that's what it is, a belief. You cannot prove ADHD. You cannot prove a learning disability. You cannot prove intellectual disability, not the mild form of it. You can't prove an emotion. Most of the disabilities that Black children are sentenced to special education for can't be proven, Candace. They can't be proven. They are opinions and ideas. They are not facts. They are beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
Do not put that belief in your child's head.
Okay. Yeah, I see that a lot with the kids that I work with. Like they'll say, well, I can't really focus because I'm ADHD. And I'm like, do not use excuses, right? That's an excuse, not like, just because I think it's important for parents and kids to know if they do find out that they've been labeled with something, that just because you were labeled with this at this time doesn't mean that that has to affect you the rest of your life. Like that's not who you are.
Well,
So
but see, here's my
you
thing.
are-
Here's
Right.
my thing. I think we should work with the child without the label.
Mhm.
Even if they get classified,
Right.
they don't need to know
No,
that, you understand, just do
Yeah.
the work. You don't have
Right.
to share the label with them.
Right.
You believe they're, you believe they're reading, no problem. You're going to extra help. That's it.
Yeah.
They don't have to hear, they never have to hear. There's no reason that they need to hear, I'm reading disabled. There's no reason they need to hear that. Now in high school, it gets a little different, but I would still argue the same position.
Okay.
I would still argue the same position. Maybe senior year, you might need to have a sit down if you still see that problem, and then you start discussing it.
Right.
Because guess what? If I'm learning disabled, why do I have to try? If I'm learning disabled,
Yeah.
why do I you understand? So you
I can't.
basically
Right.
create a glass ceiling.
Yep.
The special ed disability creates an imaginary glass ceiling that the child imposes on themselves as a result of what you said, and the teacher imposes it on themselves.
Right. Yeah.
So the teacher has a glass ceiling on how far this child can grow, and the child has a glass ceiling on how far they can grow. I've never seen anything good come from telling a child that they had a disability.
Right. Until like you're saying, like older.
Yeah. Now medical is different, Candace. If they have asthma, they need to know they have asthma because they need to know they need to use the pump.
Right.
If they diabetic, they need to know they're diabetic so they can not eat as much sugar.
Yeah.
But we're not talking about medical disorders. We're not talking about medical conditions. We're talking about theoretical and philosophical psychological disabilities that cannot be organically proven to exist.
Mm-hmm. But then once they're taking medication, it turns into a whole nother.
It turns into a whole nother ball game for two reasons. Number one, those medicines will cause additional problems. Addiction, psychosis, nightmares, homicidal ideation, organ failure, organ dysfunction, blood changes, blood disruption, sexual problems, reproductive problems, weight loss, weight gain, sleeping problems, tic disorders, schizophrenia, the list goes on.
Mm-hmm.
The worst thing you can do is give your child a drug. You're giving them something real, Candace, for something that is not real. Think about that for a minute. You can't prove ADHD. It's an idea.
Mm-hmm.
But because you have this idea about this child, you're going to give them a real chemical to deal with a not so real disorder. Think about that for a minute.
Right.
You're giving people dangerous medication to deal with a condition that only exists in your mind.
Mm-hmm.
And it's nothing but synthesized cocaine. It's nothing but synthesized cocaine. So you're locking up millions of Black men for possession of crack, possession of drugs, but you're giving their children variations of the same chemical. If drugs are bad for adults to use, how can they be okay for children? If drugs are bad for adults to use, how can they be okay for children? And that's why the solution is for us to build our own schools. Until we build our own schools, our children will never, ever be free.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so a lot of parents don't know that medication is like a Schedule C.
Right. Schedule B's, I believe. B's are two.
Which one it is.
Yeah.
But it's,
and guess what?
It's like it has to be locked in a double box when I worked in residential.
Well, guess what, Candace? If I was an attorney, and I regret not going to law school, I was accepted into a Florida law school while I was completing my pre-doctoral internship in psychology. I got accepted to a law school and turned it down because I wasn't done my doctorate, right? If I could go back in time, Candace, I would have dropped out of the doctoral program and I would have got my law degree.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I would have dropped out and got my law degree, Candace, because if I was an educational attorney, could you imagine me in the courtroom chewing their behinds up? But here's the point I was going to make.
Yeah.
I am of the opinion that the failure of psychiatrists and pediatricians, the failure of psychologists and pediatricians to give Black parents informed consent about the side effects of psychiatric medication is a 14th Amendment constitutional violation of equal protection under the law. Are you following me?
Right.
The 14th Amendment guarantees all Americans equal protection. Informed consent, Candace, is a form of medical protection. When you're not told about the side effects, Candace, when you're not told about the side effects, as far as I'm concerned, your right to equal protection under the law was violated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That is the issue that Black attorneys should be waging. That's a war we should be waging on behalf of our kids, but I don't see anybody waging it.
So maybe it's important to tell parents as well, like that they have a right to say no. Like just
they have a right.
Just
but
because
here's the issue, Candace.
doctor's telling you this.
But here's the issue, Candace. If you don't believe in medication, if you don't believe in brain dope for children, why did you get the ADHD evaluation in the first place? Why did you get the conduct disorder evaluation in the first place? I don't know if you can see where I'm going with this, but the only solution for ADHD in America is drugs. That's it. So if you know the only thing that's going to come from this is drugs, the only thing that's going to come from this is drugs, why did you get the kid evaluated? If that makes any sense to you.
Mm-hmm.
You're only going to get drugs. You're only going to get drugs. And so once they get that evaluation, Candace, you have just given the school or the doctor the ability to threaten you. They will charge you with what is called medical neglect.
Mm-hmm.
They will charge you with what is called medical neglect, and they will take your children from you. Not just the one who was prescribed the medicine, but they will take all the children from you. And so it's important that our parents understand what they're getting themselves into when they go looking for an ADHD evaluation.
Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about the psychological, like the racism within psychology?
Oh, wow. Psychology is the father of Jim Crow, segregation, apartheid, and all forms of psychological racism. If you go to England, the father of the study of individual differences, Francis Galton, he was the father of segregation and white supremacy in Europe. You come to America, Henry H. Goddard and others, they were the fathers of this notion that Black people are racially inferior to whites and should thus be kept apart. You go to South Africa, the father of apartheid was a psychologist. This is important, Candace,
Right.
because we often have conversations about Black people not accessing mental health.
Right. Yep.
Well, guess what? You cannot blame us. When you look at what psychology has done to Black people, you cannot blame Black people for not trusting the institution of psychology. It was the psychologists who incarcerated Black people against their will. It was the psychologists who said we could not reproduce, we couldn't get married because we were too mentally incompetent. It was the psychologists who said we should be segregated from white people because we're inferior. It was the psychologists who took our kids and conducted experiments on them without our knowledge. It was the psychologists who supported the psychiatrists towards brain drugging our children. At every step of the history of psychology, it has been wrought with racism against African people.
Mm-hmm.
And even now, if you go see a psychologist and you tell them something that they feel poses a threat to your child, now, mind you, Candace, you're talking to them in confidence.
Right.
You have therapist-client confidentiality. But that therapist-client confidentiality, Candace, it stops at the point that the therapist believes that you have put your child in harm's way.
Mm-hmm.
And so look at this. You went somewhere to get some help. You went to get help for yourself. And instead, you ended up getting your children taken out of your home. So Black psychology, Black social work, Black counseling has to create the comfortable and safe systems for our people who need someone to talk to, because our people are hurting. They need the treatment, they need the therapy, they need the healing, but they also need to know that what they say in therapy cannot and will not be used against them.
Right. Yeah. And because I mean, with the whole awakening that everybody had this year, there was a lot of talk about defunding the police and bringing putting more social workers. And I was just cringing at this because I'm like, well, who are these social workers going to be?
Exactly.
because
if you send them,
this is more dangerous, actually.
Yes. Because they'll be taking the kids out.
I'm like, this is scary.
Yeah, they'll be taking the kids out. If they go, it's just another attack, right? Switch the police out for social workers. So I've been really encouraging that, in my community, that the Black therapists, are seeing, or we're letting people know that we're here,
to see them.
And here's the problem with all of it, though, Candace. You said people were talking about defunding the police,
right,
and bringing in social workers instead.
right.
Here's the problem, though. Here's the problem.
Yeah.
If you notice, the Black community did not include an option of creating their own
Right,
community patrol system,
right,
their own social. See, we still have this idea that white people are supposed to save us. It's their job. You clearly know they don't like you. You clearly know they don't want you, but you are hell-bent on forcing them to do for you what you need to be doing for yourself.
yeah. So you think like in the plan, it should say we're going to have like our own, like we should be creating our own.
We should be
programs,
stepping up to the
our
plate to
own-
do what we need,
Right,
but we have no commitment to ourselves. The reason we keep calling on the government to solve our problems, we have no commitment to ourselves, no loyalty, no interest. I always tell people, if you have guests over your house, if you have guests over your house and they've overstayed their welcome and you want them to leave for the day, all you have to do is engage them in a conversation of what we can do to help the Black community. I promise you they'll go home. No Black person wants to have a conversation on what we can do to help the Black community. It is so sad, but it is so true. Think about it, Candace. What is the one conversation Black people do not want to have? What we need to do to help our community. No Black person wants that conversation. Now, here's the irony. Everybody else, that's the only conversation. You feel? In the Chinese community, that's the only conversation. In the Jewish community, that's the only conversation. In the Black community, it is the last time. Nobody wants that conversation. We could talk about Jesus and Muhammad all day long. Religion all day long. Helping Black people? No, thank you.
no. Oh boy. And do you think so what's like the backlash that you get? Is that due to that whole, like the issue where?
I think, well, for American Africans, I get backlash because they're tired of me telling them they need to solve their own problems. For the people who give me backlash, because I'm very popular. I have a lot of support. But for the people who do give me backlash, it's because of that. I do not offer a pie in the sky solution. See, the politician and the preacher, you have Dr. Umar on this end of the continuum. And then on the other end of the continuum, you have the politician and the preacher. Mm-hmm. And they're telling you what? The politicians, all you got to do is vote. If you vote, all your problems will go away. And the preacher said, all you got to do is pray and give me some money. And all your problems will go away. Then you got Dr. Umar over here talking about, so we got to work and organize and put our money together. I don't want to hear that. The politician said vote. The preacher said pray. And you said I got to work. You see. But everybody knows that what I'm saying is correct, but they don't want to accept it. Mm-hmm. You see. All mental illness has two qualities. All mental illness. And one of those qualities is the inability to accept your reality as it is. The alcoholic will tell you he's not an alcoholic. You say you just drunk 20 cans of beer in an hour. He will tell you he is not an alcoholic. He cannot accept his reality. The Black man and woman in America will tell you they don't hate themselves. I don't hate myself.
Yeah.
Yes, the hell you do. There is nothing in your collective behavior that demonstrates love. There is nothing in the collective behavior of African people that demonstrates love. Nothing we do. If you just sat back and watched Black people for a whole year, watch everything, church, school, work, you would not see nothing that makes you think Black people love themselves. Black History Month, that ain't going to get it. Kwanzaa ain't going to get it. That's just celebrations. We're talking about substance. Mm-hmm. Black people have done nothing of substance.
So you're saying they didn't do anything since 68?
Yes, we haven't done anything as a group since 68
Okay.
to change our condition in a meaningful way.
Right. So sad. And I think that all goes back to the post-traumatic.
Post-traumatic slavery disease.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's why the Frederick Douglass Marcus Garvey Academy is so important, because we have to insulate and inoculate our children against the self-hate that they will naturally learn from their parents. In other words, FDMG is the vaccination for the PTSD disease.
Mhm.
They got to get vaxxed so they don't become a baby coon.
And you're hiring, right, for the...
Yes, when we get to that point, yes. Individuals can send their resumes in, fdmgresumes@gmail.com. They should include a photo and a cover letter along with the resume, fdmgresumes@gmail. And they should know that we're not just hiring for academic teachers, we're hiring for staff as well: security, secretary, home and school, bus drivers, custodial, kitchen staff. Everything that a regular school will need, we will need. And we're also looking for people who have skills that they can teach to our children. If you know how to sew, you could be a sewing instructor. If you know how to fish, you could be a fishing instructor. If you know how to grow crops, okay, you could be our gardening instructor. If you know animals, you can be our zoology instructor. So they don't have to worry about, don't think education, think nation building. What skill do I have that I can contribute to the FDMG Academy? That's how we want them to think.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Yeah, our kids need skills.
Yes. If you don't have skills, you can't pay the bills.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it's good to start with the young kids, because a lot of the older people are just have settled for
Yes.
what things are,
Yes.
it's really difficult. That's why I truly do believe in this whole post-traumatic, because I mean, having conversations with people sometimes is so difficult. It's like, well, just be happy for what you have. It's like
Yes. Yes.
It's so disturbing.
Yes.
Happy. Well, I am a pretty happy person, but I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and can't just go to sleep and ignore it. So
Right.
that's what a slave mind does. Just kind of sleeps.
True. True.
Process, because that's a survival technique that we had to use. But
yes,
now,
it is.
We really
Yes, it is.
try to work on coming from that survival technique and healing ourselves. So
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I really appreciate you talking about that.
No problem. No problem.
Hope that some of the people will hear what you're saying, and understand it
Definitely. Definitely.
for what they, at whatever place they are. Like maybe they'll be able to take some of it in and learn a little
Right.
bit.
That's right. That's right.
Else. Maybe go to counseling with, a therapist and try to heal yourself from that trauma. Yeah, hopefully. I don't know. I'm so excited about the book signing.
Oh,
And
looking forward to it. Looking forward to it. Free Space, Middletown, Connecticut, 52 North Main Street, Saturday, March 27th, from 2:00 until 8:00. Meet and greet with Dr. Umar. Come on through Connecticut. Haven't seen you guys in a couple of years. Looking forward to seeing everybody. Middletown, Hamden, Hartford. What's my other city? Hamden, Hartford, New Haven, Bridgeport. Trying to remember all my Connecticut cities. So I'm looking forward to seeing everybody on the 27th. And then coming back at a later date to actually do the training as well. But they need the book now, because the book will serve them, especially now, because we're getting towards the end of the year. This is when the schools start pulling a lot of their little tactics and schemes with our children. So if they have the book, they'll be prepared to offset a lot of that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Candace.
It's so
Keep me
nice
posted,
meeting
Queen.
you
Oh, likewise.
on Zoom. We'll meet
Yes,
you in
ma'am.
person at the free.
Yes, ma'am. At the free space. Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, Candace. Enjoy the rest of your day, my queen.
You too.
All right now. God bless.
You too.
All right.
Bye.
You know you kinda make me nervous of all the things I do to you. If you could look inside my heart, oh then you'd be nervous too. There's so many things to say before I turn and walk away. If you don't see me again, if you don't see me again, nah, 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 nah. I say just remember, I'm your friend. I say just remember, where, I'm your friend. Oh. You are the pulse that beats my heart, like Mona Lisa, a pure work of art. I get so nervous when I see you. I guess you'll always know what I feel is true. 'Cause there's so many things to say before I turn and walk away. If you don't see me again, if you don't see me again, well. I say just